Congressman Jim Banks. Congressman Jim Banks won the open U.S. Senate seat, as you all know, as Mike Braun decided to run for governor. So now it'll be Jim Banks and Todd Young representing Indiana in the U.S. Senate. And the number count for the Senate is 53 Republicans and 46 Democrats, with one race still left to be undecided. So that's kind of what our federal landscape looks like. As you know, Donald Trump won the presidential election. So with a Republican-controlled Senate, a potentially Republican-controlled House, means things might be able to move very swiftly at the federal level, but I don't want to steal Abby's thunder for when I'm sure she'll provide us with a very robust update and is more boots on the ground. Just wanted to give you guys kind of an overall picture. And so with that, I'll kick it over to Lou and Ryan to start with the state updates.
Very good. And for those, you'll probably pick up on it. Sid changed these slides a little bit from when I sent them over. So we'll see if I didn't get a chance to look at them because I just saw your note 5 minutes ago, Sydney. So we'll free roll here and see what happens. One of the things in Indiana, and Zoe sort of started to say it, or not started, said it in her start, from a 30,000 foot view, things look the same, right? We had a Republican governor. We will continue to have a Republican governor. However, in sort of the ideological spectrum of the Republican Party, the Governor-elect Braun certainly is more conservative than outgoing Governor Holcomb. What we expect, and certainly if you would disagree with that premise, I don't think there's any room to disagree with the premise that Lieutenant Governor-elect Beckwith is more conservative than current Lieutenant Governor Crouch. And Todd Rokita retained the office of Attorney General. Really, much noise before the election about polling numbers that showed these races closer than they turned out to be. I think the Monday morning quarterbacks, we'll call those people who sell polling data by the living, for their living, are saying, well, but it was still in the margin of error. Just the undecideds broke 2 or 3 times one way over the other, which I suppose if you drill down on it, that is what happened. But just to sort of let you know what we're looking at for the inaugural of Governor-elect Braun and Lieutenant Governor-elect Beckwith will take place. Now they're looking at the 13th, I believe, of January for the swearing in. For the governor, that's a little bit more perfunctory. They actually, I believe, take office as the new year comes in. The swearing in is more symbolic. The General Assembly, well, let me rephrase, or let me just talk about that a bit. The General Assembly that was elected on Tuesday will be sworn in on November 19th. So we do have a window of time where the newly elected General Assembly and it will be seated and Governor Holcomb will continue to be governor. I don't think that means much of anything other than a statement of fact, but there is some concern among some legislative leaders about exactly what the statutory role of lieutenant governor is versus the lieutenant governor's operations as president of the Senate with respect to rules of the Senate. We can talk more about that later if time allows. Next slide, Sid. I presume, Sydney, you're driving this. I don't know who is. If not, when I ask whoever is driving it to change it, do it when I ask Sid to do it. As we come into this General Assembly, this is a long session, which means they have to do the budget. That is the only statutory or constitutional duty, pardon me, that the General Assembly has. All the other things they talk about from November through April is just noise. It could all fall by the wayside come April 29th. They have to pass a budget. If they fail to pass the budget, the governor will continue to call them back in until such time as they do it. Again, highly unlikely since you have control of both the General Assembly and the governor's office by the Republicans. But stranger things have happened. In short session years, those are even numbered years, and they must end statutorily by March 14th. By the way, these dates, April 29th and March 14th, are fixed by statute. They are not constitutional. And given that the statute is created and modified by the General Assembly, those are subject to change with every given session. In fact, a couple of sessions ago, they did change the start date of a long session that could go back as far as the fourth Monday in January. They've not done that yet. They are still contemplating starting this session on January 8th, but that date will be fixed for certain on November 19th, which is Organization Day, which is just a week from today. What Organization Day is, just because I've used the term and haven't really explained it, that is when the new General Assembly comes in, or they do this in short session years too. The body will come together to elect the Speaker of the House and the President Pro Tem of the Senate. Now, what we know is the Republican caucuses and the Democrat caucuses met last week on Wednesday, the day after the election, to elect their leaders. Speaker Houston was elected Speaker by the House Republicans. But let me be very clear. The Speaker is not elected by the Republican caucus. They are elected by the full House of Representatives. So on Tuesday, on Organization Day, there will be the formality of an election where Speaker Houston will be elected Speaker formally of the House of Representatives. But let's put it this way, the Republican, not to steal the show here for the next slide, the Republicans have a majority of 7-30 in the House. If somehow fewer than 70 of them vote for Speaker Houston and he's not elected Speaker of the House, it would be an upset of epic proportions. Same as in the Senate. Typically what ends up happening, it's done by acclamation and it's unanimous. We like to start the day trying to be as harmonious as possible in the General Assembly. That quickly subsides. Next slide. So here's the General Assembly breakdown. What's interesting is we didn't have to change this slide. After all of the consternation and the spending and the saber rattling and the negative ads, there are still 30 Democrats and 70 Republicans in the House and 10 Democrats and 40 Republicans in the Senate. If you were if you were represented by a specific party before the election, you are. And I did on the way in this morning pull some numbers. Well, not on the way in, I was driving safely, but arriving here. Just to give you an idea of the spending just of the House and Senate caucuses. This doesn't count the PAC dollars that we gave and other entities gave to individual candidates. I simply didn't have time this morning to do that. I'm not sure it's of interest anyway. But I wanted to share with you the House Republican Campaign Committee. So this is the election arm of the House Republicans. They spent $3.1 million on elections. Speaker Houston, who also receives a lot of contributions from PACs, spent another $1 million of his campaign dollars on House Republican candidates. They had 70 before, they have 70 now. So what did that money get you? By comparison purposes, the House Democrat Campaign Committee spent about $930,000. So you can see that obviously if you're in the majority, it's much easier to raise money for a couple of reasons. One, there are more of you to do it. And based on what just happened, incumbents win. And so they tend to be well funded. The Senate, mind you, the House, there were 100 races. The Senate, there were only 25. Only half of the Senate runs every 2 years. Senate Republican Campaign Committee spent $1.25 million. The Democrat Senate Campaign Committee spent $116,000. Just to give you an idea of money wins races. And so that's where we are. Just to set that clear, the numbers are what they are. Without significant changes in membership, we will not see significant changes in committee chairs. So the committee chairs that we're used to dealing with, in all likelihood, Dr. Barrett in the House Health Committee, Senator Charbonneau in the Senate Health and Provider Services Committee, Chairman Thompson of the Ways and Means Committee, and Chairman Mishler of the Senate Committee on Appropriations are likely to stay the same. Those are appointees of the Speaker of the House and the President Pro Tem of the Senate. And given, as I spoke a moment ago, that those individuals have not formally been elected to those offices, they cannot formally appoint committee chairs. But I don't expect to see a lot of changes there. So the good news is what I would continue to do, to the extent you've been advocating to those folks, or to the extent that your center is in the district of one of those individuals, continue to engage with them on issues that are important to us. There still are new members of the General Assembly. There were lots of retirements. So if you live in a district where and we can help you with that, if you live in a district where you have a new legislator and you need help meeting them, certainly reach out to any member of the lobbyist team or to Sydney, and we can help facilitate that introduction. But I think that by and large, leadership won't have changed, and frankly, in the General Assembly, it really is a game of follow the leader. And so a lot of these newly elected members will simply do as their leadership expects them to do. Sydney, did you unpause for a reason or unmute for a reason?
Well, I was just gonna, since this is kind of the end of the election part of the update, I wanted to see if there were any questions before we got into the advocacy portion.
So this is the end of the election part of the update. So if there are any questions. And let's maybe spend a minute then as we transition to the issues to at least talk a little bit about what transition is. And so immediately after the election on Wednesday, this is disputed a little bit, so I'll just tell you what sort of it appears to be, that representatives of the Braun transition team reached out to all agency heads in the Holcomb administration to essentially ask them, sort of, what do you have in process? Are there rules? Are there procurement? And what are your budgetary wish lists for next session? The problem is, just sort of maybe a little inside baseball here, but people like to hear this from time to time. There is what's called a C4, which is where it's organized under the IRS code, an entity that was doing some campaign consulting or campaign issue guidance for Senator Braun. They're the ones who reached out to the agencies. So Earl Good, who is the chief of staff of Governor Holcomb, asked the agencies not to respond to that entity, and asked the transition team to coordinate through the administration, so that you didn't have lots of people reaching out to agency heads, getting mixed messages, etc. Next slide.
Oh.
So as you see here, there's lots of confusion. The difference between advocacy and lobbying. So advocacy is, you could also put in here, is education. So in Indiana, we have our 150 members of the General Assembly do other things for a living. There are, as I mentioned, Dr. Barrett, Dr. Johnson are physicians. Representative Ledbetter is a psychiatric APRN. The most prevalent profession of the General Assembly, and I suppose if I put a bunch on there, a bunch of things up there, you would all guess attorney. Not it. It is actually home builders. And I point this out because this is a bit of a advocacy process the Home Builders Association have gone through, and they proactively seek members of their organization to run for office. And so they have in my 35 years of doing this, almost every session, another home builder gets elected. I've not done a deep dive yet to figure out if we got one this time or not, because they don't put out, like on the Home Builders Association website now, we have 15 members of the General Assembly. But I do not, I suspect I threw 15 out there. I think that number is pretty close. There is a builders caucus. They meet frequently, but they do not discuss issues that are solely related to builders, but they often vote in a block. What's important for us to know is, with respect to the builders, the most prominent builder in the General Assembly is Chairman Van Natter of the Committee of Employment and Labor. And as we look toward workforce issues, that'll be the Committee of Jurisdiction for that. And so the reason I say that's important, part of advocacy is, and we'll talk about this a bit later, but this is sort of, again, telegraphing where we're going here, is knowing your target. And so knowing, for example, I'll just use this, that Representative Van Natter is a home builder. As you approach workforce issues, you may want to interweave the problems that we suspect home builders have with finding carpenters or electricians, skilled persons, trained persons, in some cases plumbers, licensed persons, to fulfill tasks, and the struggles that ensue with trying to do that. So that's just an example of advocacy. Advocacy is making folks aware, and the behavioral health advocacy community, sort of from stem to stern, or however you want to describe it, head to toe, has done a really good job of creating an environment where behavioral health is now an issue, and it's top of mind with many legislators as we talk about healthcare funding, as we talk about workforce, as we talk about needs. I think we have done a tremendous job, and boy, I really enjoy how I put myself as a we in there, but you have done a tremendous job of educating your local legislators, and not just your local legislators, your local communities, because this is what's important. Here is where we get surrogates, employers, and others to say, it's very important that we have access to behavioral health. It's very important to begin to tailor your message in a manner that makes sense. Let's not confuse that with lobbying. Lobbying is a much more narrow issue. The target of advocacy is broad, very broad. It's community-based, it's media-based, it's whatever you may want to say there. When it comes to lobbying, all this funnels down to trying to influence a public official, an elected official, an appointed official, because we still lobby our friends at DMHA, we still lobby. We have a very distinct and desired outcome, and we're asking them to either support or oppose. It's a very directed act, and it is something that is, from a statutory perspective, defined and regulated. What is spent on lobbying activity is, in fact, discoverable, if you will. What is spent on advocacy is a lot more swishy. And I didn't mean discoverable in a legal term, by the way. We're all kind of sensitive right now about some things that might be coming. Next slide. So these are some do's and don'ts. Advocacy do's and don'ts. And again, as I sort of, in the lobbying space, it's kind of bifurcated. Lobbying requires the presence of a specific legislative issue. So this is where the lines get a little blurry. You can advocate with an elected official, but still not be lobbying them. It's a real fine line, but it's really important for you all to very clearly understand, particularly given your multiple funding sources. Some of them can't be used for lobbying specifically, but just at its highest level, understand that lobbying is, we want you to support Senate Bill X that contains the elements of the Behavioral Health Commission recommendations. Advocating is, hey, Senator so-and-so, Representative so-and-so, are you aware the Behavioral Health Commission issued a report? And here it is. And I'd like to talk to you about it. That's sort of how you would differentiate this. I know it's a little blurry, but the bright line is very clear. Advocacy stops short of an ask. Lobbying contains an ask. So just sort of watch that. But rather than one of the things I absolutely hate when I'm at a presentation when someone does a PowerPoint is they sit there and read you the PowerPoint. I suspect that you all have the ability to read these, and they've been up there long enough. But I really wanted to point to two. Let's not guesstimate answers to questions, specifically as it relates to funding. Now, I can tell you this, Sydney will start to laugh. Most people know me when I answer a question about a number. If it's all sevens, I have made it up. But that's okay. People know that about me. There have been times over the course of my lobbying career where 7 is in fact the answer, and I have to qualify my 7 as being true. And then other people in the room think, what in the world is he talking about? And then the second one in this, or the second point I want to emphasize here is negotiate. Particularly if you are there on behalf of the Indiana Council and you have made your report or your appointment, pardon me, with the legislative person on behalf of the council. I personally think, and I would suspect that your board does and Zoe does. We expect you on that day to advocate for our positions on issues. If you have a different perspective, go through that on your dime and your time. This is very real to me. Last session, one of my other clients had their legislative day, and I am not making this up. One of their members was actively lobbying against their bill. That is really, really hard to undo for me because I'm not the expert you are, and then one of our experts was there. It was in the home health space, just in case anybody was trying to figure it out. Next slide. So this periodically over the course of a session. Well, let's back up because we labeled this one way, but it's really not a call to action. Just think about your own personal lives. That isn't it much easier to befriend somebody and then ask them to do something versus the first time you encounter somebody, you're asking them to do something. If you build a relationship with someone, your ability to interact with them and connect is important. So I would encourage all of you in this time between the election and the end of the year, invite your legislator to come see your facility, invite them to coffee, meet them where they are. And I always remind people this. There wasn't, I'll just pick on because I see Beth. Ed Clear wasn't walking down the street and they plucked him up and said, you're a member of the General Assembly, and he did it involuntarily. This is what he signed up for. So they signed up to be contacted. So do it. They want to be informed. But if you can go and meet with them before the case, before we need to make a case, it's really important because then they'll take your call. And that's very important. I mentioned earlier, knowing, this is number 2, do your research. It's important to know that Chairman Van Natter is a home builder. So how you might connect with him, find, if you can, some synergies there. Many of us have dealt with a home builder before in building a home or remodeling a home or do something like that. oftentimes it's been an unpleasant experience because we're dealing with something we didn't understand. We're going to them and dealing with them with something they don't understand. We have to remember that. Always offer a follow-up for them. I'm old school, leave your business card. If you want to go more old school, so they could put that in their Rolodex there, that makes us feel better. But and then also, and this isn't on there, but it's something that I've started doing lately, make sure you know who their staff are. Because if they've got a good staffer and you develop a relationship with their staffer, it sort of cuts you. They're the triage person. They're trying to figure out who's important to their legislator and who's not. If they've met you, immediately you're more important. So when you follow up afterwards, you follow up not only with the legislator, follow up with their legislative assistant. That gets you a little bit ahead of the game. Next slide. Sid, were you going to take this one?
I was going to take this one.
Good. Let me catch my breath.
It's probably the most you've talked in a minute. So this one, we just wanted to highlight a couple things that are more council specific. So kind of following up on the kind of call to action with your legislator, we want to be sure that we're highlighting all the things that your local CMHC, CCBHC is doing. Obviously, we're going to need to do a lot of education, continued education on CCBHC. So, you know, it's a great opportunity to, like we've said, get in front of them to talk about the Behavioral Health Commission report, talk about the Bowen Workforce Playbook, talk about CCBHC, demo, even non-demo, since, you know, that's going to be our big ask for this session. Legislators love data. They like being able to hang their hat on information, you know, if it's saving money, if it's bringing in money, if it's, you know, resulting money spent on ROI and outcomes, all those types of things that I know you guys are all tracking. Be sure to share that. I mean, you know, if it's in a more digestible format, that's always great. Some of these folks, you know, nowadays people have the attention span of like a goldfish. So if we could just get to the high points, that's helpful. There are certain legislators that will want that deep dive into all that specific data, and we can help you navigate who those folks are that would appreciate that kind of level of detail. But for the most part, if you can just hit them with the high points, but know that you have the data to back them up, that's great. And then also, I know you guys serve wide county areas and everything, but if we, depending on the legislator that you're meeting, if you could highlight things that are happening in their district specifically, maybe in their home county specifically, that goes a long way. It just helps kind of paint a picture of what's happening in their own backyard. Sometimes there can be a disconnect between what you guys are seeing and experiencing on the ground versus what their life experience is and what they've been exposed to. Sometimes we have to paint that picture and connect those dots. You know, we don't want it to all be, you know, this deep, intense stories, which I know we have plenty of, but we also want to share those uplifting stories of, you know, the good work that you all are doing and, you know, the differences that we've seen in people's lives. And then finally, we've linked it here in on the next slide, but share the 2025 public policy platform. Those are our asks. When Lou said those asks, but we want to educate what we're going to use that funding for. So that's the advocacy component. You know, why we need this crisis and CCBHC bridge funding, why we need this group home room and board rate, why we are going to be needing these workforce policy changes that we're going to be advocating for. So if a legislator, you know, you're meeting with them, you're having a conversation, they're like, what are you working on this session, or what's important to you this session? That the public policy platform is that. So if you have any questions as you're looking through that, and you need anything more specific or want some clarity on anything, I'm always happy to answer any questions. And so this is just a list of resources we provided. So again, the link to the public policy platform, a link to the council website, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, To Lou's point, if you have a new legislator, this link to find your legislator, you just type in your address and it'll pull up all your legislators, federal and state. I'm not sure if it's up to date yet since the election just happened. It might be populated with the new legislators after Organization Day on November 19th. But if you need help in the meantime figuring that out, if it's not up to date, then we can help you with that. And then below are just the individual caucus websites. They'll each have their own priorities and platforms, and it just also has deeper legislator information, like their biographies, their education, if they go to church, what volunteer groups they're a part of, that kind of thing, to help with that research we were talking about earlier. And just another highlight again, February 10th, Monday, February 10th, is Zoe is calling it. I'm blaming Zoe for this. Pack the State House for mental wellness. So we will be meeting on the 3rd floor, South Atrium. We want to, as Zoe said, pack the State House. This is going to be a very difficult session. I don't really want to sugarcoat anything. So we need you all there to show up in force, to show, that we're committed to all the work that we're doing. We're committed to, if we get this additional funding, all the work that we're going to be doing with it. We want the legislators to be able to see you, be able to identify with you and the work that you all are doing. So please, please, please mark your calendars for February 10th. We'd love to see you there.
And I would add to that, if you do your homework like I suggested and meet with your legislator between now and the end of the year, tell them you will be there on that day and you expect to see them there. It's just another opportunity to reinforce that day, because for those who have not been, or for those who have been to the State House, you'll know what I'm talking about. Legislators have the opportunity to eat lunch 3 or 4 times many days. And so you need to be the one differentiating factor at this lunch versus in a different one, and that be that you're present and other constituents aren't. So that's very important to build the momentum for this day. If your only intent to participate in advocacy is show up this day, I'll simply say it on Zoe's behalf, that's not enough. So I saw Zoe, I believe, unmuted too. So.
I wanted to also highlight, so on Org Day on the 19th that Lou and Sid have both highlighted, all 150 legislators will be receiving this invitation along with our public policy platform in there, as well as some client stories that the marketing committee under Leanne's leadership has pulled together. So they will be receiving a very nice packet from our system, from the council, on November 19th. However, this invitation is in the chat and will be sent out to everyone. You personally inviting them to attend also makes that connection, like, oh, I did get that in my mailbox, but your local constituent relationship really is what makes that. We had great success last year, and I just wanted to highlight some of that success because I don't think we speak about that enough, but there were some significant relationships that were built last session, starting with Senator Mishler and the work that Bowen Center and that region has done in really developing that relationship with Senator Mishler. Senator Mishler knows us by name now and knows our system and recognizes us from a financial standpoint. And so that success, thanks to Rob literally tracking him down at a Rotary event, really established that. And then all of us showing up at his hearing regarding our bill last session was really impactful. I also want to highlight Matt Burden with Senator Charbonneau. All of the site of service and all of the language that we worked on, and we were exempt from a lot of that from a system, that has to do with Matt Burden and Porter Stark's relationship and that ongoing relationship with Senator Charbonneau. I want to highlight Amy Mays with Representative Thompson is in Cummins' backyard and really working to develop that relationship so that we can be in the budget. And then Centerstone with Dr. Barrett. Those were key 4 people that we have developed some strong relationships, but not the council. It has been you as the member who has made that easier for us at the State House. So I do want to highlight those. And that was a significant improvement compared to last budget session when those relationships were not as strong. So I'm actually, and Sid's going to laugh and Lou's going to laugh, I'm actually looking forward to this budget session because they know us. And so we don't have to start from ground zero. We already have that relationship established and we can build upon it. So I just want to thank those that I highlighted and want you to be thinking, if you've not established those individual relationships, who within leadership, because we still have several that we need to work at, who could you connect with prior to session?
Thanks, Zoe. So with that, we have about 15 minutes left. Happy to answer any questions that any of you all may have.
Sid, if you could stop sharing the screen so we could look at everybody, and then if there are no questions, I have updates as well.
I have a question and a surprise to no one. Do you think, Lou and Sid, what do you guys think about the likelihood of the legislature doing something prior to the governor and lieutenant governor being sworn in terms of just clarifying some of the lieutenant governor's responsibilities? I have a concern, I know it is shared by others, just about some of the language used by the lieutenant governor and what impact that might have on policy and on legislation going forward that would impact our patients.
So I can tell you right now, so there are kind of 2 legs to the duties of the lieutenant governor. The only constitutional duty, well, I shouldn't say that there are 2. One is, and I'll quote my friend Abdul, who said this yesterday, one is waiting for the governor to slip on a banana peel. The other is to break ties in the Senate as lieutenant governor's role as president of the Senate. Other duties assigned are statutory in nature with respect to being the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, and then head of OCRA. I forget what it stands for. Rural Affairs is the last 2. The
Community.
O is the C. Okay, Office of Community and Rural Affairs. Like, see, teamwork makes the dream work. With respect to, and the biggest concern that leadership in the Senate has is exactly what does president of the Senate mean? And so we think in most of the duties of the president of the Senate are defined by Senate rule. And so Senate Chief of Staff Jeff Papa is reviewing the rules to see what modifications need to be made to make it very clear that the agenda is set by the pro tem, Senator Rod Bray, not the lieutenant governor. And I can tell you, as someone who's been doing this for a minute, that historically that has always been the case. And we have not always had a situation where the lieutenant governor is of the same party as the majority in the Senate. If you go back to Governor Frank O'Bannon, or pardon me, he was lieutenant governor before he was governor, so he's president of the Senate. And then Lieutenant Governor Joe Kernan in recent, it's not that recent anymore, but in at least my memory. And that's what happened. And so from that perspective, the concern is that he could hijack, not my words, his words, or not his words, but Senate leadership word, the agenda, and not call down a bill. So they're trying to figure out, are there statutory changes that need to be made? And are there rule changes? Rule changes are easily adopted on organization day. Historically, they are. And they don't change a lot, but I think this one would clarify it to make sure that he could do that. There is historic precedent when Governor O'Bannon did at one point in time try to keep the voting machine open for 3 days while they were waiting for a vote to come back. It had to do with beer baron. I was there, so it was actually kind of cool. But what ended up happening, how they resolved it was Senator Bob Garton was the pro tem at the time, and he instructed the clerk to close the voting machine. The pro tem or the lieutenant governor said, "You can't do that." Senator Garton said, "He works for me, not you." And so that is how they did it. That story has been told. I think, Beth, the comment that you're referencing was during the campaign that he would fire anybody he could fire who used pronouns in their email. If you noted what quickly Governor-elect Braun said is, we're not doing that. We're going to hire based on merit and qualifications for the job. I think that one need only look at the First Amendment United States Constitution to know that someone will test him pretty quick and the state will get sued, and that the legal process will rectify it. The challenge, Beth, I think that from a process standpoint, from a statutory standpoint, I think they can do lots of things to stop, if desired, the impact. The challenge is you can do all of that, you can't take the bully pulpit. And so I don't know how willing the pro tem will be to turn the microphone off. That remains to be seen. But I think from a pure legal perspective of his ability to change the law or impact the law from his position, I don't think I think that will be resolved. And I just share with you, the law says, the Constitution says, the lieutenant governor breaks a tie. They are not the 26th vote. And what that means is procedurally, and what has happened over the years a lot, if the Democrats have a position where they've tied the vote and they want the bill to fail, one of them leaves. Because 25-24 still fails, but the lieutenant governor doesn't vote. Because you have to get to 26. So that's another, maybe too far in the weeds. Maybe people find that kind of a bad thing, but it's a game of strategy. And so you've got to know all of it. But that's sort of, I don't see that, that's a long answer. Short answer is I don't see them passing a bill on org day. But they're setting it up to pass a bill during session to take some of the statutory requirements away. And the way they do that is making sure that he can't stop it procedurally. That makes sense.
Any other questions?
Is it possible to get the slide deck you guys presented today?
Yeah, those go on our website along with the recording, Gail. And one
Okay.
thing I also wanted to share membership wide is that we have done this avocation and lobby connection with boards, with several of you, with staff and executive leadership. And so if that is something you are interested in, and also just staff who have had a heart for advocacy and want to learn more, please reach out. And Sydney and myself and our lobbyist team, we have tried to make ourselves available in that education, whatever those needs might be. So I did want to offer that too, if some staff were not able to join this Cup of Joe today. So that is available. Any other questions before we highlight our Starbucks winner and share a couple other updates with all of you? Beth, that was a great question.
Zoe, this is Rob.
Yes, hi, Rob.
One thing I would add, and not being an expert with this, but being in a position of authority like most of us are, we know when someone's approaching us with something they want, and it's hard sometimes. And sometimes you even maybe you think to yourself, oh man, I want to avoid that person. Something that I would say that's been an approach that I appreciate is when someone comes to me and wants to know what my problems are and how can I help them. And a lot of the legislators are like, how can we afford what we know we need? And I think that an approach of that can be successful is just saying, what can we do to partner with you to make sure that this works? We know there's a lot of good groups that need money that there's not going to be enough money for. And I've watched the Indiana Hospital Association, for example, get kind of labeled with they fight everything. And if we go to them every single time saying, no, don't do that to us, I think we could get labeled. So I think that this idea about conciliatory, I want to help you. What can I do to help get you what you need? Not even just solving this problem is like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Literally, what are you trying to do here? And make sure that we are seen as going, that might not be great for us, but I'll work with you to see how I can make this happen. And I think that that's just such a stronger position to be in rather than just being seen as a no group. And making sure, I think it was great, Lou, is the idea that when they see us coming, it's not always because they're like, oh man, here comes Rob again. He's going to ask for something. They have problems to solve too. And if they see us as somebody that's trying to be helpful for them, that's, I think, the best way forward with them is we cannot get into that position of being like, oh my gosh, Zoe's going to come and she's going to tell us that she's going to fight us on this bill every time. And I've seen her work both sides of those things, and it's not easy. But again, I think I like that idea that if you're not sure what to do is to reach out. Zoe can help, Lou can help. And I have, and I think, just before you have a meeting, I've called and said, how can we be on the same page? What are do not talk about, what are do talk about, and just making sure my language matches what we're all trying to do on that advocacy side of thing. Like you said, if I got the meeting because I say I'm part of Indiana Council, to switch it to be what's good for me is not cool. I think it's really like if I'm going and they're talking to me because of us as a group, is to make sure I really am advocating for everybody. I think that was solid, so.
Yeah, no, Rob, I appreciate that. And I can't stress that enough heading into budget session, being all under the same tent and all under the same ask. And so you have in your chat the public policy platform, and then also the Behavioral Health Governor's Commission report, which is very much in line with our specific ask. And so that will also add a lot of credibility and advocacy outside of our group. Will it get Senate Bill 1 again? No, probably not. But I would like it to get at least some level of priority or attention to be able to move forward in improving mental health for all Hoosiers. So Rob, I couldn't have said that better. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Questions? You have some, Lou, Sid, Ryan, if any of the strategy or chessboard, any questions, now is the time because Lou is a pro chess player. Let's just put it that way. Okay, Lou, any final thoughts?
I would just tell people that starting this morning, we'll get updates out. The state budget committee is having budget hearings today and tomorrow. And so we'll be reporting back out what agencies say their priorities are. I don't expect to hear a lot of new information right now, given my previous comments about the transition. It's been made very clear in the run up to these hearings today and tomorrow that these are the Holcomb agency recommendations, that the Braun fingerprint has not been put on them yet, but at least we'll hear we may learn, for example, what Medicaid, what the budget number is today. So we'll report that back out when it's time.
Wonderful. And that is something too that I wanted to highlight. So public policy has been very active even during this off session, and Sydney has been leading that. During session, we will add another flash update as needed, like we did last budget session, in case there are specific asks that we need to align with, like we did. So we will update everyone on when that will be, but I wanted to give a heads up. So Scott, I know you have a Starbucks winner for us and wanted to share a few words. So I wanted to give you the microphone, and thank you again, ISC, for sponsoring today's Cup of Joe.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is fascinating. I've had the opportunity to do a little bit of advocacy, not lobbying, but advocacy at a federal level in my prior role as the president of the American Retirement Association. So I can tell you that it really does make a difference when you go to see your congressman and your constituent. They are very open to listening to you. It definitely makes a difference. I'm glad to hear that you guys are so active in the state there. So we had the opportunity to meet some of you at the first meeting in Bloomington. We're probably the newest sponsor that you have on board. So we look forward to getting to know all of you better. Our firm, ISC, we're a financial services firm with a very deep niche in providing retirement plan consultation and advice to nonprofit and governmental employers with a very specific focus on the community mental health center population. So we're headquartered in Texas. We currently serve 29 out of the 39 community centers in the state. They follow in Texas the same model that you have here in Indiana with they were created after the Community Mental Health Centers Act of 1963, et cetera. So they face a lot of the same challenges that you do. And the reason why we're here, our why, is because we're making a meaningful, positive difference in the financial security of our clients, and that makes it fun to come to work every day. There are a lot of advisors out there. A small subset of them do retirement plans, and a very, very small set of those focus on the government and nonprofit sector. And so you're not just a one-off to us if we work together, but you're very core to who we are. In fact, the statement, serving those in service to others, it's not just a statement for us. We actually trademarked it because it's so core to who we are. So we work with our clients for retirement planning. Beyond that, we know what your peers are doing, what's working, what sometimes where they could improve with things like reducing turnover, attracting hard to find positions, or fulfilling your CFO's fiduciary duties on managing reserve accounts. So we're committed to growing our presence in Indiana and look forward to meeting you all soon. And with that, thank you for that. Our winner today is Adam Kurtz with Parkview.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. So we'll get that out. Just a couple save the dates. November 25th is open office hours. If you don't have that on your schedule, our next Cup of Joe is Esther from DMHA to talk about the crisis response teams and the regional systems and to learn more regarding those. And then February 10th is our legislative day. So instead of raising my cup, I'm raising our public policy platform, because together, building the health and well-being of all Hoosiers is what we will do. So we are going to cheer to advocacy, and we are going to go in even stronger and fight for those with mental illness and substance use disorder. So thank you, everyone, and have a phenomenal day. Take care.